Hi, welcome to episode 4 of Stucky's Travels. This is going to be part 2 of Florida.
And we decided to go ahead and add in St. Augustine, Site 6, for your viewing pleasure.
So, if you wanted to see numbers 1, 2, and 3, you'll have to watch part 1 of the Florida, episode 3.
All right. So we'll talk briefly about Key Largo. Key Largo, there were a lot of different things to do. There's scuba diving, glass bottom boat tours, snorkeling, just swimming at John Pennekamp State Reef Park.
So Key Largo, the word key comes from the Spanish word cayo, C-A-Y-O, which means small island. So when you talk about the Florida Keys, it's referring to a string of several small islands that are connected together by a series of bridges and roads.
And while we were scuba diving, they had a structure of an old structure of Madonna.
I don't know. It was some sort of underwater statue.
It was female. I don't know.
So then another place to check out would be Biscayne National Park, which is over on the far east side. So just east of Everglades National Park. One thing I failed to mention yesterday is a great souvenir for when you're checking out the national parks is the National Park Passport. You can buy them for about $6.95. You can see in the bottom corner I'm opening it up and you can see what it looks like. You can buy it at any of the national park gift shops for about $7, and then every national park site has a stamp, and the stamps are color coded by region, and the book is broken up by region, so you can keep track of all the national parks. It's also great because it has the date, so you can keep track of when you were at that park as well.
Right. And this gives you an idea of what Biscayne National Park looks like. It's almost all in the water. Part of it you can see there's a chain of islands pretty far out. When we were there, spring break, March time, the boats weren't going out there, but we were able to still rent a canoe or kayak and kind of go through the waters just off the shore. And there's a lot of miles of area you can see and check out. A lot of different organisms that you can see from the boats. Sometimes alligators. We didn't happen to see any while we were there.
Also, you can, there's hiking. If you take a boat all the way out to the chain of islands, there's a hiking trail. And depending on the time of year, you could even get a permit to go lobstering. So that would be really fun to catch something like that in season.
Yep, and as you can see, this is just north of Key Largo, just south of Miami. So, and this is kind of what it'll look like from the water while we were kayaking around.
So the reason why we decided to add St. Augustine is it's really a city that has something for everyone. There's a lot of history, but you're also on the ocean, so you have beaches. There's a giant outlet mall for current modern shopping, but also a walking pedestrian street lined with shops in the old downtown section with quaint little mom and pop shops, as well as the World Golf Hall of Fame, ghost tours, Ripley's Believe It or Not, so trolley tours, just so many things for multi-generational trips, really. Something the grandparents, parents, and kids can all enjoy.
Yep. So this is the old senator as it shows, and this tree would have been around, as the sign says, when Ponce de Leon first actually discovered St. Augustine and even found came upon what he termed the Fountain of Youth.
So the Fountain of Youth is really a natural spring. Probably nothing more to it than that. You can look up lots of fun stories about the history of the Fountain of Youth. They do let you sample water from the natural spring. I don't notice that it's made me seem any younger, though.
Yes, it has.
So young, so young.
So young. So the picture on the left here, this is the actual mark of, yes, it's a cross, but it's a mark where the first settlers actually landed and arrived and founded St. Augustine. St. Augustine is supposed to be the oldest city in the continental U.S., the oldest continual city in the U.S., outside of Puerto Rico, which was about 50 years older. So 1565 is when they landed. The picture on the right, this is the Mission Nombre de Dios.
This is the Shrine of Our Lady de Leche. Inside there's a statue of the Virgin Mary nursing baby Jesus, which is how it got its name. The whole area, including the cross area that Miles was talking about, is called the Mission Nombre de Dios. You can see the Spanish architecture. A lot of the city still reflects that early influence from Spain. There's a lot of really old buildings, like I mentioned before. This is one of the buildings that you get to go inside of at night if you partake in one of the ghost tours. A lot of old wooden buildings. The British actually burnt down St. Augustine in 1702, which we'll refer to again later. But there are some buildings that have remained, or buildings that have been rebuilt to try to preserve as much of the authenticity as possible.
So these are the gates that kind of lead you into the Castillo de San Marcos.
It's a 17th century Spanish fortress. You can see the aerial view here. This property is also run by the National Park System, so you can get a stamp in your passport book here. You can get an annual family pass for the national parks, I believe, for $80. If your family's going to try to hit several national parks within one calendar year, that's definitely the way to go. You can see the shape is laid out for strategic defense, of being able to see if any enemies are coming on the water. One really cool part about the castle that you can't really, the fortress that you can't really see from the pictures, is what it's made out of. If you look really close, it's actually made out of coquina, which is Spanish for small shells. So over time, the shells compact, and it's considered a type of sedimentary rock, actually. And so they use that to create the fortress.
All right, so just a few pictures from the inside of the fortress and kind of what it looks like. And you can see the walls pretty high and pretty strong fortress.
They still have people, especially on weekends, that dress up in clothing from that time period, and they fire guns and cannons at certain times of the day to kind of recreate that, what it would have been like to live in the area at that time.
All right, so it says the oldest wood schoolhouse in the United States. As we talked about before, the British burned the city down in 1702. Schoolhouse doesn't actually show up in tax records until 1716. Supposedly the schoolhouse was built before the 1702 time period. But there is a building in, I think, New York, that is also a wooden schoolhouse from early 1700s, before 1716. So supposedly this is the oldest wooden schoolhouse in the United States. Probably is, but it's been rebuilt sometime after 1702.
And even if it's not, they advertise it as such. That's one thing when you visit cities. Sometimes you have to be careful of if they're touting themselves as the biggest or best or oldest or something. It might not necessarily be true. There might be some sort of little asterisk next to it, which like if this or maybe, that sort of thing.
All right, so this is a museum, and this museum is or houses a bunch of just fine art from the 1800s. It was actually started off as the Alcazar Hotel in 1888, built by Henry Flagler, and at the time it had the world's largest indoor swimming pool in the 1890s, and saw thousands and thousands of guests during the 1890s. Sometime in the 1930s, it got converted from a hotel to the museum.
Flagler is also a famous name in St. Augustine. Still today, Flagler College is in St. Augustine, named for Henry Flagler. This is another museum. This one houses things from the historic Gilded Age. So it's supposed to have like 12th century, supposed to look like a castle type thing with Spanish influence. So another museum. Lots of museums to see as well.
And there are beaches and definitely places to swim. So if you're tired of everything, you can go to the beach, see some crabs, some seashells.
Use your boogie board or your surfboard to catch the waves.
Unless it's winter time, and then it's pretty cold. We ran in, but the water was probably in the 50s. So we ran right back out.
I think the water was more like in the 40s.
And Michelle, I don't think went very far.
I got into my knees. That was plenty deep enough.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned before, the World Golf Hall of Fame is also in St. Augustine in the outskirts. And so it's a neat way. There's a pro golf shop there. Periodically, they'll have little hole-in-one tournaments where you can pay some money to take a shot over the water and try to get a hole-in-one to win some major prize. So it's just a neat facility overall.
And that is our kind of off the beaten path Florida places instead of just all beach. Like we said, we wanted to kind of show you some other places in Florida that have a lot of unique history or education or just different places to go.
Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.